Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream podcast. Today, I am thrilled to invite Chloe Osunsami. She is the head of digital PR at Aira. We are going to be talking all about kind of like a digital PR audit, like what to do when you get a new client, the things to look for, how to just kind of get your bearings with a new client, what's working and whatnot. So I think this is a super important thing that I think a lot of different agencies and a lot of different, freelancers and people in digital PR do this different ways. So I was really keen to talk about what works. But before we get into it, I just want to remind everyone to like, subscribe, share this stuff with your colleagues. The more we can get people listening to this stuff and watching it, the more we can have great guests on like Chloe. How you doing, Chloe?
Hi, Vince. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thrilled to talk today. I want to start kind of at the beginning. Get a brand new client at your agency, or maybe you're a freelancer. What are some of the first things you do to kind of just, like I said, get your bearings and get assimilated to, the new industry, maybe?
Great question, Vince. So I first start with making sure I really understand the brand and the client. So I like to understand where they're at, how they're doing, their objectives and any particular focuses before I jump in, and why they believe PR should be a part of that puzzle. Once I really know that, I can then start to look at specifics to do with them. However, can't look at that bigger picture in a vacuum because we as buyers don't really operate in that way either. So we need to make sure we're looking at them versus their competitors. So I'll start by pulling out maybe 3 to 5 top competitors that I will benchmark them against during an audit, and make sure that they are either direct competitors or challenger brands that are coming up through the ranks, because you can't compare, say, apples or oranges to a whole fruit bowl. So we need to make sure we're comparing product specific competitors when we're doing this. So I'll pull those out and then I'll start to look at the bigger picture. So I will start by looking at things like, and these things really interest me to start with, things like organic traffic versus paid traffic to see where they're getting their traffic from. I will look at keywords in top positions, and I will look at like backlink profiles as well as mentions and PR in general. And then I'll really start to dig down. So I have a look at that bigger picture, basically to almost check the playing field, right? To see how they're doing versus those competitors, which ones are doing well. So then I can dig down into the PR specific stuff to see what correlates with those that are doing well. Once I've had a look at that, I will then go into the referring domain profile in more detail. So I will have a look at quality, relevancy, quantity. I'll look at link intersects. So where competitors have got links from that my client or brand hasn't. I will have a look at brand mentions and volume, but also where those are sitting, and then the content and the stories that are helping them land those. So I start really broad and make sure I take into account their objectives and what they're looking for. I then narrow it down and look at, say, the bigger picture versus competitors, and then I go even more granular with like the PR, the stuff that we can kind of have an impact or an influence on.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because it sounds like you do look at things that aren't directly related to PR, although we were just talking about this before. I mean, there's different definitions of the term, and but it sounds like you look at more kind of SEO metrics at least at first as well, like organic traffic and keywords. How do those fit into the digital PR playbook? I don't want to get too far off, but I feel like this is an important thing to kind of get into.
Well, if you are doing work for a client and they do have search objectives, so you're tied into those search objectives, you really need to make sure that they have a really strong foundation and website from an SEO perspective too. And so I don't necessarily do all of that stuff myself. I'll work with someone from the SEO team to make sure that they have that stable foundation and everything is in working order. When it comes to things like keywords and focus areas, it's really good for us to know which brands might be focused on the particular focus areas that our brand is focused on. So they might have more keywords around specific topics that they're high up the rankings for, so in those top traffic driving positions. And then I might look at their activity a bit more to see what they're doing and what might be helping them to get in those positions, because that's what we want to do around those topics. So it kind of helps to shape questions and then what I look into to be able to see what we could potentially be doing to get where they are, essentially.
Do you typically have clients come to you with just like link goals or more kind of PR goals, or do they always typically coincide with SEO goals? Does that make sense?
That does make sense. We have a mix. So
Okay.
I think one of the important things about this is like one size doesn't fit all. So I can't say that like for one brand who comes to us because they want coverage and that is their main objective, that like I would look at exactly the same things for them as I would for someone who we need to make sure that we are tied in with their search. So we're taking a blended search approach. However, I still do take an interest in those things. I think it's just the way I am inclined. I still take an interest in those things because I know even if we're targeted and need to get coverage, there's still that bigger picture. We're still trying to help that brand get that coverage because they want to improve their search visibility and at the end of the day, their traffic and their sales. And so I'm always going to have a little look, even if it's not as in-depth as say for a client who really is into the search side.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my follow-up question because it sounds like it is always going to be important, right? And you might be stepping on some toes, right, of maybe in-house SEOs, but more often than not, you're going to get a lot more out of it if you're all working together, it seems.
Yes.
Okay, Chloe, so you mentioned a lot of different things that you look at. What are some of your go-to tools for people that might be kind of new to this, or maybe tools people don't know about?
I'm not sure there would be many that people don't know about from what I currently work with, but I will say like you can shape your audit to fit what you have access to. So I currently use Ahrefs. Moz do a lot of manual research, and also we have an internal tool that I can use when it comes to search and keywords. Obviously, Google Analytics and GSC is great help for your own brands and clients, but I try to keep a consistent view because I don't have access to that for the other brands. I try to make sure I look at them through the tools. I have used other tools previously that do a great job too, so like competitors like Ahrefs, like SEMrush, etc. They're also great. So you can shape what you look at. They all work slightly differently, but at the end of the day, they do very similar.
Yeah.
I would say I use, obviously AI is a very hot topic about when people do and don't use it. I do occasionally use ChatGPT or Gemini to speed up part of the analysis, but I would never use it to pull the data. And one of the things I would say if people are looking to do that is just make sure your brief is really hot and you make sure it delivers an output that you can then sense check. So whether that's in a table with all the sources or it's workings out, make sure you can really thoroughly check what it's done for you, because it can lie.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question, because I think one of the things that I didn't hear you say was the kind of AI component, right? And that, as we talked about before, is driving a lot of new people, I think, to digital PR. A lot of new agencies are getting into digital PR, maybe getting back into digital PR. But so what are some of the things that you look at from that perspective? If, a client comes to you and is like, oh, we want to show up more in AI, right?
Yeah. So I do look at AIOs and LLM features as part of the audit. now. But in my opinion, and I think a few people share it, I don't think anyone's really got it nailed just yet with the reporting on it. So it's quite a difficult one to do. The numbers go up and down because it's not like a linear view. On like you've increased this much, and the percent split is really helpful. So how much you appear versus your competitors. But equally, you have to be so careful because it doesn't always take into account the right sentiment yet or the types of mentions. So we tend to use an overview, and then we have our internal tool around keywords helps us with visibility versus competitors for relevant queries. But I'm just very careful when we do obviously report on anything like that at the moment or look into that. But it is an area that I'm really excited about because I do think it's really going to develop and quite quickly in the coming months. So I'm saying now they don't have it nailed, but it might not be that long really before like we've got a much stronger way of looking at that and reporting back on that too.
Yeah, for sure. Another one that I think a lot of people are kind of unsure about, and you mentioned this too, is this idea of like looking at backlinks and specifically relevance. I know a couple agencies have like their own proprietary relevant kind of tool to measure, quantify relevance. Is that something that do you have a tool like that? Do you quantify relevance in that case when you're looking at competitors and the links that you have as well, or your client has?
We do try to quantify relevance. Again, I think it's a really difficult one, and I don't think there's a set way that anyone does it, which I think is a
Yeah.
common theme in PR, right? It's not a set way that anyone seems to do it. But we do try to quantify relevance. It's more important than quantity, and just as important as quality of backlinks plays into that quality, right? So that is something that we make sure we really do look at when we look at a backlink profile and don't just focus on the numbers, because the numbers just aren't going to make as much difference as they used to back in the day.
All right. Well, again, that could be a whole separate podcast, and maybe we will do that because that is something that is very interesting to me. And we've been trying to look at different ways to do a report on that. But I want to get back to one of the things that you mentioned, and something that was always interesting to me when I worked agency side, and it's this idea of when you have these strategies that you're developing in these audits, you're looking at things like competitors. A lot of the times, I feel like the clients might not know who their competitors are.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, and I'm sure, and you kind of alluded to this, like you're looking at the landscape and you kind of come up with what you think are the competitors. How much in general how much of the strategy and from this audit, like how much are you coming up with versus what the client is bringing to the table?
I think that a lot of our clients come to us for our expertise. So they'll look to us for our strategy and how we would recommend doing it. That said, we always do take into account their expertise. Obviously, they are the ones in the brand every single day. So we make sure we really pick their brains, and we find out who they think their competitors are as well. So we can make sure we're looking at those, even if we're also looking at other competitors too. Any product focuses as well, because they might have like a new launch coming, and actually we might need to make sure we're shifting in that direction. So that might shape the strategy or the direction of the strategy, and then we would shape everything around that direction that they're going to go. Because it aligns to the wider business goals. But when it comes to things like drilling it down to tactics and things, the team would pretty much direct that and what works best for that industry, as long as obviously it worked with what the client could also approve and deliver.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I just always remember being hesitant to ask questions and like afraid, especially like as a freelancer, like you're kind of afraid to reveal that you maybe don't know as much about the client as you should or something, like, but is that do you recommend just asking whatever? Like, is that a fear that should not be part of
I would ask as many questions as you want. When we first start with a brand, we try to do a brand immersion session so that the team can ask all and every question that they could possibly have to really get under the skin, because your client works at that brand and lives and breathes that brand every single day. And you're not going to know them as well, know the brand as well as they do from doing your own research, because you don't work there. And that's okay. I think it's totally okay to be asking questions. And if you don't get them all asked at the beginning, it's also, I believe, okay to go back and ask them questions later on, because at the end of the day, you're going to deliver better work for them. And as long as they're positioned in the right way, then it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I mean, so that brings up another thing too. A part of this audit is like, I know a lot of times in agencies, you have kind of like a strategist or a manager or a head, the head of digital PR is taking a lot of maybe the sales calls or the kickoff calls, or, there are the people that are doing the work may not be the people that are leading the strategy at the onset, right? So there's sometimes this disconnect where maybe more of the junior people don't feel as involved, and they kind of are given, here's what we decided we're going to do, and go do it. And the manager kind of manages and leads it and makes sure that the boat is headed in the right direction. But how much of that kind of early onset, that the brand immersion, how important is it to get all of the people involved who are going to be working on that client early on? Is that something that you guys do, or do you kind of, is it the managers and kind of the higher ups lead those calls and then kind of dispense the relevant information?
So it's so important to get the team working on it on those initial calls. You're so right, Vince. Because otherwise they don't get the same understanding that the others who've been on those calls have. And it allows them to ask the questions too. At the moment, we do have quite a senior team at Aira. However, we've always tried to make sure that whoever is in the team and whoever is potentially going to be working on that client is involved in the conversations. And when we start to pull together what we think is going to work for them and what the way that we want to go based on the audit that's been carried out, which they might be involved in parts of as well, then we make sure that they're involved in those conversations, so that we all shape what we think is going to work in terms of tactics and ideas as well. So they're always involved in things like brainstorms too, and pulling that towards what is going to be best for them.
Yeah. What advice do you have for people who maybe, have more junior employees, to kind of get them up to speed or to feel confident to ask these questions and ask the right questions? Because I kind of remember that as well, where you're working in an agency and you have junior people who are, I mean, on the one hand, they're not as knowledgeable about the client to be able to ask that kind of stuff, or about the strategies, right? They don't know the right questions to ask. But on the other side, like, they're very hesitant to speak up in a client call, right? Because nobody, so yeah, do you have any advice for that type of scenario?
So I used to do quite a few things actually with my team. So I would use Google Forms. Google Forms are great because they can be anonymous. So if people really don't want to speak up in a team environment, so internally, not in front of the client, you could use a Google form and get people to submit their questions, which you could then answer on a team meeting. And then when we answered them, just making sure that everyone realized it's not a silly question. Because then if people start to realize those aren't silly questions, there's no silly questions, it's all learning and shaping like what we're going to be doing, then the confidence starts to build. We did a lot of mentoring, and that wasn't just with like more senior team, like really senior team members, but maybe from other teams as well, so they could get to understand the bigger picture on what they're doing or how that feeds into other things, which helped them to feel confident with the questions they were asking. And that helped because I think it made them feel like they weren't being judged for their knowledge, because it wasn't someone more senior in their team, so they could ask questions from someone who was almost a similar level. So that helped too. And then in one-to-ones, just really trying to I guess build that bond and make sure that people felt comfortable enough to bring up something if they weren't quite sure. We've always had quite an open, and I feel anyway, an open culture where you could just say, I'm not sure on this, like, can we talk about this? Or
Mm-hmm.
I actually think we need to do a little session on this. And I think that is really important, because then it should help them to grow, and understand more, and equally understand that, yeah, no question is a silly question, because it's going to help you develop.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's get kind of back into the audit. There was a specific thing that you talked about where, in AI, right? Like there are new tools, new things that you're looking at. Has that drastically changed? Has AI drastically changed the way that you maybe uh, deliver services with Aira? Like I feel like there's kind of like the before and after these like idea of like AI citations becoming like a big thing. So like I'm really curious of just like when you're doing these audits, like are you looking for new different things, or is it kind of more the same and the strategies are just we got to get you in the press and however we can do that.
So obviously, I think because of the increase in AI, obviously digital PR has become really popular again, because it is what's going to help. If that is the objective, to get included in AIOs and on LLMs, because of obviously brand mentions highly correlating with appearances there. I think that when it comes to the audit, because not much has really changed in terms of digital PR. If you've got a solid PR strategy where you're trying to get your client coverage to increase visibility, which could include coverage and links, then that is what's going to work. So not a lot has changed in terms of the audit, because you're still aiming to do that. You're still aiming to get them in the right places in front of their target audience to increase brand visibility. The only thing that's really changed is that we were talking about looking at inclusions in AIOs and LLM features, and if they are currently there, or if they, what kind of split they have versus their competitors. So things like that. But I wouldn't say it changes the strategies all that much.
Right. Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and that's kind of what I've heard from most people I talk to is it is kind of more the same, and like I said, like the idea is just to get you mentioned in the press, so it should be complementary to what we're doing already as digital PRs. All right, I want to get into a little bit of the like identifying good strategies, maybe that your competitors are doing, or identifying things that you're like, what are you extracting when you're looking at the referring domains that they have, and the question is a little bit nebulous, but I guess like let's get a little more specific. Let's start there. What can you learn from just looking at referring domains from a client, like their competitors, perhaps?
So when I'm looking into their referring domains, I'll probably include brand mentions in there as well. Just
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
do
okay.
want to go with coverage and links as an overall. We try to look at where they're getting them, and then really dig into like the quality relevant places that we think are going to be similar to where we would want to target for our brand, based on the target audience and the product. And then what is being covered in those spaces? So how are they getting that coverage in those spaces? Are they doing big data-led campaigns, or are they doing more reactive thought leadership? Are they really like on brand stories, or have they got less relevant so that they can get into some of these places? What is it that's grasping the journalist's attention and getting them in front of their target audience? And is it something that we would want to be doing? Is it something that our client is possibly missing or just haven't been doing enough of? And then I'd also have a look to see if there are any like quick win opportunities. So from those, is there anything that we could be doing immediately
Oh,
to
interesting.
make sure we're in similar spaces?
But what would be like a quick win example? Do you have one off the top of your head?
So if we have a client who works in the space that could deliver expert commentary, and it's around a topic which is really relevant to them as well. So we might have spotted them talking about something. We might have a slightly different spin on it. Or if we know it's currently a popular topic, we might start looking out for reactive opportunities around certain topics for expert commentary. That would probably be one of the best quick win opportunities, would be thought leadership, if the brand has got someone who is authoritative in being able to talk about those subjects. So yeah, that's probably what I would go for.
Yeah,
Win.
that makes sense. Yeah, and sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
The looking at stuff that works. I think so. The other question that I kind of thought of when you were talking about this is this idea that like when you spot a competitor doing something that you said something like when we see their strategies, is it something that we'd actually want to do? So there is, right, this give and take of like relevant links, getting a ton of irrelevant links, just to get your brand out there versus getting a ton of relevant links, or getting less, I'd say, fewer relevant links. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I assume you get that kind of question a lot. It's like, oh, well, our competitor's showing up and all these, and you're like, well, they're not really that relevant. But there's always that back and forth between like, well, do you want to just get your brand out there? Do you want to get your brand out to everyone and anyone, right? And supporting the SEO goals versus just supporting general PR goals, so talk to me a little bit about that, because that's something that I feel like I ask everybody, and it's different for whoever I ask.
We get a lot of those questions. I feel like, and this might just be me and who I've spoken to, but I feel like recently we've had a lot of questions about guest posting as well. It almost feels like it's coming back around for some industries and brands. And we might get asked, say that, oh, our competitor's doing it though. Like, is it not something we can do? And is always a hard conversation, especially if the brand brings it up. But I would say that there are definitely some tactics, and I think when you see types of coverage, I don't even think you need to be a PR to really see that something is relevant, and you'd go, oh yeah, it makes sense for that brand to be there, versus, oh, I'm not sure why they're featuring in that place, or I'm not sure why they're talking about that story. Essentially, it comes down to where their target audience is. So we always want to be where the target audience is, because we want to be on that buyer journey as well. So some tactics don't fare well for that. And a lot of the time, like the newer digital PR tactics versus like the older school SEO tactics, the newer digital PR tactics tend to sit better within getting us in front of the target audience, because you're shaping it more. And you're also it's getting you into those quality, relevant websites. Rather than the I'm trying to position it carefully. Probably directory of like blogs that are
Right.
potentially in a similar space, but not quite as relevant.
Well, I mean, so there's definitely degrees of it, right? Like from my perspective, at least, when you talk about guest posts, that's one example of where it's like, there's those sites that are on all the lists, all the databases that you see. And I did like a big analysis on all these, and very rarely are they quality sites. And quality from perspective of like high enough DR and a domain rating, domain authority, and like get organic traffic, which are both indicators of quality, obviously not the end all be all. But like, so there's that, but then there's also like thought leadership, right? That's a type of guest posting where, like I give this example sometimes where I if I were to reach out to Ahrefs and ask like, hey, can I write a guest post on, a digital PR, some topic that I feel I have some expertise in, that is a guest post, but it's not, I wouldn't put that in that same bracket. And that's maybe where I think those tactics make sense for, like, that's true thought leadership. But then the other side of things is, somebody gave this example where it was like, they got their client mentioned in all of these local news sites in the UK. And it was for like a brick and mortar store that only existed in like central London, but they were mentioned in, even in the outskirts, like where those brick and mortar stores didn't exist. So then the conversation goes to like, well, is that even like important to get you? Like, is that relevant? Like, yes, it supports the SEO goals because you're getting yourself out there, but like, you're not getting yourself in front of the people who are going to walk over to your store and buy something, right? So curious what your thoughts are on that kind of things when we're talking about relevance.
Definitely needs to be in front of the target audience. Like you were saying about your example of your guest post with Ahrefs, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's relevant. And yes, that is an end of the guest posting scale, which would be, thought leadership and would be more relevant. And something we would consider. Whereas it's probably the other end where you're just trying to get the brand out there to anyone and anywhere and things. It is starting to be picked up and ignored, I believe. And I think that it's going to go more in that direction, just like back in the day when people were using forums and comments to build links. It's going to start to be kind of like just pushed out. And I think as long as we're focusing on the stuff which is going to make a difference and is the right thing moving forward, then you're going to put yourself in a better position. And it's always been about the audience, right? Google wants to show the audience what they want to see. And so they're going to get their information from where that audience is. And so in my mind, and I believe in many others, we need to be where that audience is, because that's where Google is getting their information from, because they want to be showing that audience what they want to see.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, 2 other questions.
Yes.
We didn't get into using existing content for pitching, and I think this was something that you maybe alluded to when we talked prior to this, whereas as part of the audit, you're looking at the content that is on the site and like, what can we use for PR? Talk to me a little bit about that and what that kind of audit looks like, what you're looking for, and then how you could reuse some of that content.
Absolutely. So we'll always have a look through their existing content to see what they currently have. And there are 3 things we tend to look for. First of all, if it's a topic which could be of interest to the target audience currently or moving forward. So is it unique or different or extremely timely? And it's really important that it's of interest to the target audience, because then it'll be of interest to the media or the websites that you then want to feature on. Number 2 is if it's got expert or thought leadership or data behind it to make it more credible and give it a unique angle. Or so can some of it be turned into a quote? If it is unique and different and it's from the brand on their website, can some of it be turned into a quote potentially from someone? I say from someone, from a real person at the brand. I know there's been a lot of conversation around that recently. From a real person at the brand who has authority to talk about these things. And then finally, like, is it up to date or new, or can it be refreshed to make it that way? And as long as it hits those 3 things, we will try to use it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, and then I think the last question is repeating this type of audit. Is this something that you're looking at monthly, yearly? Like, what does this look like for a client? Is this an ongoing basis where you're constantly talking about this kind of stuff, looking at what's working and content you can repurpose and whatnot? Because I assume there are clients where you're not the only person producing content on their site, right? Like, and it would probably be a little different if you are, and it's a little easier to keep track of that stuff. But for the larger clients, let's say.
Yeah. I'd say it varies so much as to how regularly you need to do it, because it depends on how quick that industry is moving. So some industries are a lot slower. And then I would say that you don't need to keep looking all the time. I'd say definitely try to redo it once a year. And I would jump into insights monthly at a top level, just to keep an eye on, say, if there's a new competitor, a challenger brand. We don't know how quickly a challenger brand can move up through the ranks, and then you want to make sure you are keeping an eye on them. And if not monthly, then definitely quarterly. But I'd redo the whole thing every year just to make sure that you've got the right strategy for the following year.
Is this a deliverable that you offer to clients too, or is this something you just recommend as a PR, freelancer or agency, you're just kind of doing consistently?
So I have delivered it before, and some clients really find it interesting. Some brands just don't have the time for it. They're not as fast about seeing all the data and the graphs and things. They just want to know what you want to do, and a couple of top level reasons why you've picked those things. So having the data to back it, to be able to say, oh, we've done this and this is why, they're happy just to see that bit.
Kind of to support the strategy rather than like formal audit. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I'm trying to think of like, that's probably how most brands would do it, is just to, if you're pitching an idea, like you said, having the data to back it up, but then also, because you think about, if you're managing 4 or 5 clients, it's like, to formally have something like that, I think is important, but sometimes it's tough to find the time to formally create a new audit, right? But I guess that should be the question. Like, is this kind of more of a formal process for you internally, at least?
Yes. Yeah. We make sure that we review everything. So we have annual reviews. So we'll make sure we work it around those and what the plans are for the next financial year. And just make sure we rerun it so that we've got that new data to back all our decisions.
Yeah. Love it. Well, Chloe, what have I missed? What is something that I haven't asked you that would be good to cover?
I think that there's a couple of things that I would probably add. Would be just don't be afraid to evolve. It's not necessarily something you've missed, Vince, but I would just say don't be afraid to evolve the audit over time. Nothing stays set. It's totally okay for it to change, and that's definitely one of my favorite things about it. And you might say present it internally to someone, and then someone might ask you a question. You'd be like, "Oh, actually, I really should look into that. I'm gonna start looking into that moving forward." That's quite a good thing. And like, don't think that kind of feedback or that questioning is bad against the work you've done so far. And then I would say always think about the story as you go too. So it kind of feeds into that, really. What are the data points actually saying? And what is the story helping you to shape? So I say to everyone in my team who does an audit, like, put yourself in the client's shoes. If someone wants to show this to you, like, what would you ask based on what you were presented? Are you interested in seeing something else from that, or interested in finding out a little bit more, and then just dig more into that? There's not really like a this is finished point, which is annoying, but equally it's almost like you can then delve into and shape the bits to be able to
personalize it yourself. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice. Like, and probably a way to keep this stuff interesting for, like you were saying, like junior hires or people that are kind of just getting into it, to motivate them a little bit to get thinking strategically and stuff. I love that. Well, Chloe, where can people find you if they want to connect and learn more about digital PR audits?
So on LinkedIn, Chloe Osunsami. Feel free to connect with me. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to get back to you on message.
Yeah, and as I always say, if you do have questions, You could also pop them into the comments and YouTube, Spotify, wherever we're posting this stuff, and I'm happy to relay them over to Chloe. Chloe, thank you so much. People can also check out Aira.net, right? Yes. Aira.net is the website for our fantastic agency out of the UK. And reminder, like, subscribe, share this stuff with your clients, or share your stuff with your clients too, but with your colleagues. And, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. So Chloe, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Vince. It was great to chat to you.
All right. Good luck, everyone.